What's going on, my friends? Welcome back to Theory Hammer, where today I'm going to start a new series. I'm going to start us with a tips and tricks series. So I've got a table here, I've got some generic units, and what I want to go over today is walling off your opponent. There's a couple of ways that you can do this, and there's a couple of different strategies involved with it. So I'm going to show you guys today what I normally do in games in order to prevent people from charging me, or to kind of mess up their charge, or to box people in. So there's a couple things we're going to go over. So if you guys like the video, thunderhammer the like button, the subscribe button, and Nurgle's bell icon. Check out our second channel, leave a comment, look at our other videos, do all the YouTube stuff, because it really helps with the algorithm. It actually really does, and I appreciate it. So what I've got here is just, a regular standard terrain setup for Pariah Nexus. And we've got a unit of Assault Terminators and a unit of Votann Terminators. So what I'm going to do is use a couple of these pieces of terrain to explain how you can block out things like Terminators from charging into you, or to stop things like Terminators from getting out of terrain. So I'm going to move some of this stuff around, I'm going to set some things up, and I'm going to show you guys how this works. Okay, so we have now removed the top pieces of this building just so that it's a little bit easier to see, and we've nestled our Votann Terminators. They're called Einhir Hearthguard, but Votann Terminators is easier for my brain to remember. We have them kind of nestled in this L on our side of the table. Over here, we've got our Assault Terminator squad, and they want to charge these guys. They were probably hanging out behind this building. They moved up here, or they rapid ingressed over here, but we're going to go over something a little different in a moment for that, because I'm going to show you how this isn't very effective sometimes, depending on where the unit is that's coming from. If it's directly in front of them, we now have a 6-inch gap here. So, just about 6 inches. But the problem here is that the front model, there is a gap between the terrain. This base size can't fit into that gap between the terrain and that model. And then all along the side here, that's just less than an inch. This pushes it out over an inch. So this depends how you want to do it. You can push these guys back depending on the base size that needs to get through the wall. So you could have these guys even further back and still prevent these from charging through there. Now the way that this is going to work is that when they make their charge roll, they're going to have to go laterally and then through. So we're going to roll their charge roll and see where they end up. Okay, so I flipped my template the other way, and also these things are super useful to have. I forget where I got this thing, but it's got everything. It's got 9 inches, it's got a 6-inch, a 2-inch, 2-inch that way, it's 4 inches right there, and then it's got this little 1-inch guy on the other side. Super useful. Anyway, we're going to need a pretty high charge roll in order to even make this charge. We're going to need to get a model to here, which is probably a 9 or more. So if I just measure this, that's going to be basically a 10-inch charge. So it went from a 6-inch charge. If you had put them too close to the wall, you can get within an inch, and so it would have been a 6-inch charge there. If you put them too far away from the wall, they can come through, and then maybe it's like a 7 or an 8-inch charge. Now we've made it a 10-inch charge, so we got to roll pretty high in order to make it. We didn't, unfortunately. But let's set up a little bit different scenario where this Terminator squad ends up closer. All right, so in this example, we have basically the same scenario. The Terminators are just a little bit closer. Now, because of how we've placed these models, they can't fit between here, and if they're outside here, it's over an inch away. So they've got to go around still. Their charge range is going to be a little bit easier this time though. Basically it's a 7, because they've got to get this guy's base past the wall. So we roll up our charge roll, we do roll a 9, and that's going to allow our models to move. And this is where we're going to end up after the Terminators make their charge move. And now this is where we end up after we pile in. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of these guys that can swing now, because that guy's within base of this guy, who's within base of that. Yeah, so in total it's going to be 7, and they were right in front of the terrain here. They only really needed a 7 to get in. They rolled a 9, and they only get 7 out of the 10 models into combat. So not great, but considering they were so close, this does still mitigate how many guys are able to swing. There is a different trick you can do, but first we're going to see how this method can apply to a building kind of like this. And you'll probably notice that I did remove the little thing that was here. This will prevent your guys from being able to stand there. This piece of terrain is supposed to be there. He couldn't actually be there if this was here, so I moved it just for the sake of easiness so I can actually show you guys how this works. But technically, this guy would have been stuck back here, and would have been out of combat. So it actually would have been 6 if this thing, this annoying ass thing, was actually there. Okay, so this is going to be a slightly different example, but the same problem, and I've also removed the tops of this so that we can see down into here. We have totally blocked off this L, all the way down, all the way across, up until the wall, basically. So, this Terminator squad has to roll probably a 7 or a 9, maybe even a 9, to get to this guy over here. I'll measure it in a second, but the point being they can't fit through the gap, so they can't be in between the wall. They have to be on the outside, and if they're on the outside, the amount of range between this point and one of their bases is over an inch, and so they're not actually able to get into combat with me. So they have to go around this way. So let's roll their charge roll and see what they get. Rolling that charge roll now. That's going to be an 8. Let's measure and see what they can get. So when we use our template, we see that he can get 4 inches this way. He's got 4 inches left. Whoops, this isn't perfect because I'm holding the camera. I probably should have just put the camera up. Another 2 inches is going to get him onto that side of the wall, and then he basically needs that other 2 inches to get into combat. So he needed that 8 in order to actually swing his base around to be physically placed there. I'm going to move the rest of them and show you guys where they end up. After we pile in, we see that only about 4 guys can actually swing on this unit. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. So we are going to take some swings, but we've done a really good job of mitigating where this unit can go. They are only getting 4 guys into combat, and we had to make them roll an 8-inch charge. If they had rolled 7 or less, they would have just straight up failed it. They needed that extra inch to actually be able to place that first model there. Now with the guys that were over here, I didn't even bother measuring it because it wouldn't have been enough. To get to here is about 6, and then you got to get another 2 inches through. He'd end up about here. He's just not going to make it. But over here, they definitely had a route there because there was a guy that was close. Either way, if they go this way or they go that way, not enough guys can get into combat to really do a huge amount of damage to the unit here. So in my case, I can fall back and shoot and charge and stuff, but this is a good way to totally mitigate your opponent being able to charge at all. It forces them to go around things as opposed to being able to go through, because infantry can go through walls. They're one of the only things, infantry and beasts. So if you can prevent your opponent's infantry or just things from going through walls like this, it's going to be very beneficial. There is a drawback to this, however, and it is just exactly the converse of what we've done to our opponent. Our opponent can keep us inside of the building. Now before we do that, however, I do want to show you guys one other version of this, which lets them get through the wall, but in a way that totally screws over which models can fight, and I think is the better option almost every single time. So let's go and show you guys that instead. Alright, now in this example, we have set up almost the exact same scenario as before, where the Terminators are very, very close to the wall. Now, they can either go this way to get into combat, I don't know, maybe a 6-inch charge there, not really hard to make. Same thing on this side, the models over here probably need a 6, it might be a little further on that side. The point being, their charge range isn't really all that blocked out by what we're doing here. But this time, we have left a gap big enough for one model. The reason that this is important is because if a model in this unit can get into base-to-base contact when it makes a charge move, it must. The unit, though, has to stay in coherency. So all these other guys that want to get over here and then pile around, they can't. If you remember from the original example, we were able to get about 7 of these into combat. Let's see how many we can get into combat now with the same charge roll of 9. So if we look at this from a top-down view, 9 inches, it gets us, a decent amount of range there. So that's about 5 inches to get to the wall-ish. Call it 6 to get through. And then we'll have another 3 inches that we can play with there. So 6 inches, we'll call it, to have him come onto the other side of the wall. 6.5. I guess it's going to be 6.5. So now he's got 2.5 more inches that he can go. Okay. So let's pick up this thing and kind of just measure. So we can go maybe about out to here. That's about as far as he's going to be allowed to move there. But let's see where the rest of them end up. Alright, so we've almost finished moving everybody, but we ran into a little problem when we tried getting around these sides here. The problem is coherency. I'm out of coherency right now. If this guy moves over here to get within base of him, because he can reach him. If he gets here, he can get in base of this guy, and then that will give us a total of 7 guys that are in combat again. However, he can't, and these guys are out of coherency. So what he could try to do is move 9 inches up here and get into base of this guy. So let's see if he can make it. Well, it turns out he was just shy of being able to get into base contact with this guy because this damn wall's in the way. If he could have just gone straight, he would have been able to make it, but he couldn't make it. So now we have 1 guy that can't swing, 2 guys that can't swing, 3 guys that can't swing, 4 guys that can't swing. Nothing can pile in because it would be out of coherency, so it's just stuck here. So before, when we were right in front of him and we rolled a 9, we could get 7, maybe more into combat if I'd moved them a little differently. In this scenario, there is nothing that you can do. This unit simply cannot, even if they had rolled a 12, they can't go any further than this because these models, that guy might have been able to. These models can't break coherency. So they have to stay in coherency and have to be out of combat because of this wall. It's really annoying. And I'll show you how this works a little better for things that deep strike kind of in here and then come right through the wall. Because if you noticed before, stuff that's kind of like right here, they can just come right through this wall and they don't really have to do much to get around there. It inconveniences them by like an inch or so. This formation though does not, because it still requires one of their guys to get into base over here, and then it forces them to be along the wall, pushing guys out of base to base. So I'll show you guys that one next here. All right, so moving on to another kind of the same example, but different placement of the models here. We've rapid ingressed our Terminator squad into the nook of our L here, 9 inches away from these guys. They've probably got some stuff over here hanging out. We probably have more control over this area of the board, and so we're deep striking these guys here. It's now our turn. We're gonna move through the wall. We're gonna try to go around, and we're gonna try to charge the Terminator squad. This is where our Space Marine Terminators are going to end up after that 5-inch move that they get. They had to be about an inch off from the wall because of where I am. So because 9 inches away, this is where they end up after a 5-inch move. If they roll that 9-inch charge, let's see where they can end up now. After our 9-inch charge, this is where we end up. We end up with only 7 of our Terminators actually able to swing because we have to make 1 guy into base here because somebody has to base if possible. That guy has to remain in coherency, and I don't even think he is in coherency. This guy probably has to come back a little bit, which, yeah. So like you can see why this is a problem, because once you have a guy here, it forces people to remain in coherency, which pushes them out, kind of no matter what you do. So I think this is almost always the better play. I'll show you guys how it works in a piece of terrain like this now, just to demonstrate. And it really doesn't matter what you roll, like I said. You could roll 12. Because this guy is here, you have to maintain coherency and you're forced to keep guys backward. Your charge roll kind of becomes irrelevant at that point, and it's a really good way to mitigate an entire unit being able to get into combat. And it also really messes up where their units are placed, or where their models are placed. And this is going to be our final example. We have a squad of Votan Terminators here, at least our example for these. We have the Votan Terminators. There's a gap there just large enough for 1 guy to get through. Doesn't matter what our charge range is at that point. If it's a 2, I have to put a guy there. If it's a 12, I have to put a guy there. So, where are they going to end up? So this is about where I've ended up, and I'm out of coherency. These guys have to move back, because I tried finagling it a bunch of different ways, and it just doesn't work. Because of coherency, these guys have to stay on the outside like this. I can get 4 guys into combat probably, and it's a questionable 2 inches there. So I'm kind of just eyeballing it. So you can see why this becomes a problem and why this is way better than just putting a line of guys here and letting them go around, because they can pile in and they can bring more guys around. In this case, I can't pile in. I'm just stuck where I am. Nothing can really go anywhere, and I have 5 Terminators attacking me that were literally right in front of the wall. So that is how you prevent charges in this game, or how you manipulate charges. Now I'm going to show you, like I said earlier, like a few minutes ago, how to prevent this unit from getting out of the wall. It's the same principle, there's a couple different ways you can do it. So now we've gone ahead and switched up which units we're using here. In this case, we have just, a secondary unit, or maybe this is 2 units of 3, but we have the Sidonian, Cerberus Raiders, the dog horse things from AdMech. We got 6 of them just blocking off this wall. What I've done here is giving you guys a demonstration of how to block them off from the movement phase. This unit can entirely not get out of this piece of terrain. It therefore cannot shoot them. However, because I'm within an inch of the wall, they can just go like this and get within an inch. They don't even have to get closer than that. That's now within an inch. And so if they want to, they can charge me through the wall and destroy this unit, but they're not going to be able to move anywhere because there's not going to be an objective here. Most likely it's probably going to be around here. There are some that cross into this, I think, but usually it's here or about here. So this unit will be able to charge but not be able to get out. There is another thing that you can do though, which is you can allow them to get out with their charge, which I personally like doing more depending on where they're positioned. That way they can't shoot you, but when they charge you, they have to pass the wall, then become visible, and so that way you can then shoot at them next turn. Now, technically in my last example, these guys could have gotten through the gaps in the bases when they moved through the wall, so they could have gotten out that way, but we're assuming that that wasn't the case. You know, you can put them a little closer together. Now, in this example, we've created a gap here so that they can't actually move here, because if you put a model there, it's within an inch of this guy, and so it can't actually be placed there during the movement phase, but they can be within an inch. And so this model here, we'll just grab one of these guys. He does fit. And so if this unit wants to charge me, they kill this stupid unit that's getting in their way, and then they're in line of sight. That's not always going to happen. A lot of the times people are just going to blow this unit off the table. This unit might go somewhere else. But the point being, they're stuck in this building, so they either have to go that way or that way. They can't really go anywhere. And you can do this with really cheap units like this. Scout squads are great for this. A lot of things that will have the scout keyword are great for this. Pathfinders are really good for this because it's a 10-man unit, and you can just cap the ends so they can take up a pretty big amount of space. And this principle is the same here as well. So if your opponent is in this building and they've got all their stuff behind the wall here, you can be like, okay, well, I'm going to keep you behind the wall. And you can put your units like this and kind of make them go where you want them to go. So they can't actually place their models there in the movement phase, but they can charge through it, and they have to. They have to get through this gap to be in base-to-base contact. I think you get the point there. But really, really useful tactic. Being able to wall people off is extremely important in this game because it's one of the very few things that you have any control over, which is moving stuff. There are ways where you can totally block off your opponent from moving as well. It's kind of the same concept, and I'm not going to go into it too much in this video. I'll probably make a separate video specifically about move blocking. That's when you kind of, the thing that I didn't do in the game that Justin and I just played. Wow, Dogecoin's up to 18 cents. All right, so that game, I should have move blocked Justin with my battle suits, but I decided to move backward after he talked me into it, and I thought it might be something worth doing. I realized after I'd done it, shouldn't have done it. So I'll make an entirely different video on that just to show how to move block, because there's a couple different things you can do there, which includes blocking people out of walls, but it also includes just getting in people's way. So like just putting a unit here. Well, you can't be on top of these things, and your thing is too big to be there, so you literally are just stuck here. Things like that. So we'll do another video on that at some point in the future. I'm going to try to make this into a series of some kind. So if you guys liked this video, be sure to thunderhammer that subscribe and like button, hit Nurgle's bell, leave a comment, check out our other videos, and check out our first channel as well. It is linked down below. Thank you as always, my dear theorists, for watching my videos, my very silly videos about Warhammer 40k and toy soldiers. You guys are the best. I'll see you theorists back at the laboratory.